Okay, well, it looks like everyone's pretty well organized. The time is 6:46, so we will begin the ad hoc committee on Malden Hospital site development. With us today, we have Leah from the Friends of Fellsmere Heights. And you wanted to update us on some of the work that your group has done with the Boston Architectural College.
That's correct.
And just so everyone knows, there are two citizens here recording our meeting this evening. And we have a full council meeting beginning at 7, so we have about 15 minutes.
Sure.
Leah,
Okay.
why don't you go ahead and take it away.
So on Friday, we had an end of the term review. As some of you know that were able to attend our World Cafe event, it was an informal meeting to get community input as to what people would like to see at the site. That was on November 17th. The mayor was able to attend. We were pleased about that. Of course, John was there, and we had Steve Winslow in attendance. And we had some people from Medford. We had a city planner from Medford. And it was a good event, I feel. So from that meeting, they are in an information gathering stage, more or less this term. And so what we saw on Friday, last Friday, was the result of that. So they've done a great deal of work on analysis of this site, recommendations, looking into the climate mitigation possibilities for the carbon offset of bringing in more green space. There's a lot of really good statistics and data points on that. What they produced was on very large scale printouts, like 24 by 36 inch printouts. And there was a lot of information crammed onto these full-size printouts, and of course when I printed them out on my 8.5 by 11 reductions, you would almost have to have a magnifying glass to read them. But what I do have for you is the PDF, which I can send to you via email. And it's in a very rough form, but there's a timeline. This is the history and the context of the site. They have the analysis, which has a lot of good information in it. Here's more analysis where they get into the particulars of making the argument for more open space in Malden. And let's see, these are big files, so I'm not sure if this is going to come up. But at any rate, it's here. It's really going into the existing buildings, existing roadways, access, and the like. Now, this next phase, over the next term, will go into more of the master conceptual site planning. So that's where we'll get into the statistics of the housing options relative to the open space, what kind of amenities would people like to see at the site, which was discussed at the World Cafe event in November. And that's where we're going to see more of those kinds of details and particulars. So, of course, we'll be happy to come back and keep you posted. John was invited to the meeting on Friday. With the busy holiday season, couldn't attend, but you all, we'll keep extending invites to these things because we would love to have your input. Are there any questions about where they're at, the BAC? I just want to reiterate that the purpose of engaging them and obtaining the Gateway Initiative assistance through the BAC was to assist toward a CPC application. We may not be able to satisfy every single requirement on the Medford and Malden application. However, we feel that probably a good 2/3 of it, we're fairly confident that we can play an advisory role and assist you toward completing that. We did go, Bob and I, Stephen and Prisco were also there to the Medford Ad Hoc on the 27th of November. And we updated them on what we were doing through the BAC. They were pleased to get that update. Bob, of course, presented what he's suggesting as a mission statement just to help make this sort of inner-city joint ad hoc effort a little more cohesive effort, something to sort of guide us or guide the committees going forward. You'll find that attached on the back. Medford's ad hoc committee members, which is John Falco, there's Brianna, there was George, you know, they really liked it. Their thing was, you know, they want to be clear that you're on board with it. So I think they're looking for Malden to give them the verbiage that you're comfortable with, and then they can review it at their next ad hoc and go from there. So these are merely suggestions. It's not anything that you have to accept. It's just something that we felt would be helpful, because I think you asked the question at the last meeting, what are the objectives?
That's right.
And so, you know, just something to kind of help give us a little bit of form to our function. And let's see.
Leah, can you state the mission statement
Sure.
suggestion into the record?
Sure.
It's not that long.
So the suggestions for a draft ad hoc mission statement are,
Do you have another one of those forms, the document we're reading off of?
oh yeah,
So I gave mine to Council Spath.
You have two?
I do.
We're gonna put one in the, for the clerk.
It's on the back page. So it's to generate for our respective councils, mayors, and citizens a comprehensive community-based plan and funding strategy for the Malden Hospital land, embodying the needs and wishes of our two communities, bringing residents together in an effort to bring that plan to fruition. By means of these steps, 1, secure a letter of consent from Melrose Wakefield Health / Wellforce in support of 2019 CPC applications. To update and collaborate with other elected officials and city agencies whose help is needed for this effort. 3, to launch a funding campaign to pursue public and private donations and grants. And then 4, and finally, foster public awareness, enthusiasm, and publicity at important milestones. So, is it concise enough? Do you have any thoughts?
Sure, we'll go around to the committee members.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like it. My first instinct here is I like it because it doesn't seem to put its thumb on the scale one way or the other. It is saying we want a community-based plan and funding strategy that brings everybody together, so it's good in that we are showing that we're considering all options for the best of the community, so that was my first thought.
Okay, great. Bob will be thrilled to hear that.
Any comments or questions? Any opinions?
Any
Council staff,
suggestions?
No, I think
on,
it's you know, vague enough to include things and be interpreted in a way that encompasses a lot. So I think, you know, if we get too detailed and we miss a step, I think you know, we can always add to it, is my point, rather, right?
Yeah, right. The only thing I would add is number 3, how it mentions public and private donations and grants, which I think is wonderful, but I think we're seeking funds from any source for our consideration. I don't think this discounts that opportunity, but it doesn't, you know, it does limit it just to donations and grants.
Okay.
You know, I don't think that we adopt mission statements as a usual rule, but certainly this isn't your typical committee. This is a large issue, and I think it's nice for us all to get on board with a sense of direction. Any ideas about, any other questions, comments, or ideas?
Do you want to change
Councilman?
number 3?
You want to move to
I see your point, Jeff.
sharpen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, change it a little.
oh, just to be a little more
Broad.
inclusive.
Mhm.
Funny.
Just sources.
Yeah, instead of
sources
donations
of
and grants,
funding.
funding sources.
Yeah. Yeah,
Keep the
funding
public
source.
and private, and then replace donations and grants with funding sources?
Yeah, that's what I think would,
You could
that
add-
would cast a wider net. Well, we could add on top of it. What's the pleasure? I can't make the motion from the chair.
I mean, I'd move to
Councilor
change it to sources because it would, donations and grants worth it. Would
It captures everything.
Seem pretty redundant. if it kept-
Funding sources?
Yeah, well, let me just read it out loud. Launch a funding campaign to pursue public and private, funding sources. Yep. So I will move to replace, scratch donations and grants and replace with funding sources.
Second.
Do we want to keep funding earlier in the sentence as well?
I would maybe, let's
Take out
see.
funding so it's not
Launch a
repeated twice?
campaign.
Launch a campaign to pursue public and private funding sources?
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think that's a good sentence.
So that's your recommendation.
All right, so that's
Yeah, that's fine.
a motion by Councilor Canals, Yep, seconded
Do you have that,
by
Lisa?
Councilor Di Maria. All committee members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any committee members opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Do you want to adopt this mission statement with that amendment at this time, or do you want to consider it, or do you have any other changes?
So this is a joint ad hoc mission statement, so I think someone has to start, and then, so if Malden adopts this, then we forward it on to Medford, then it becomes,
Should we adopt it with the word joint before we hear from the Medford side?
We'll provisionally adopt it pending approval from Medford.
I think that's a wonderful
That's good.
approach. That's a wonderful approach.
Yeah, that gives you some
Okay,
leeway.
all right. Is that your motion, Councilor
Yeah,
Camel?
my motion is to provisionally, is it what that
you
is?
said
Yeah,
that.
that says
yeah.
Provisionally accept the mission statement pending
Comment from the Medford
comment
City
and
Council.
agreement from Medford City Council.
I'm
Second.
just gonna watch and learn.
Okay. Council Spatafora, just to let you know the motion, Councilor Camel made a motion to adopt this mission statement provisionally, pending the feedback and approval of the Medford Ad Hoc Committee.
Okay.
Debbie, do you mind if we have you come to the other meeting? We need you for a forum.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, that's been adopted.
You
Okay.
have one, huh?
I do. We do have quorum without you, and it seems like you needed another round. Leah, do you have anything more you'd like to add?
Just that they had the impression initially, they had heard, I don't know, through the grapevine, that somehow they thought Malden was moving ahead. I don't know if the BAC work was misinterpreted as such, but we let them know that this is in a very preliminary stage, and that was why we were there to report to them.
Moving ahead in what direction? Or
Just moving ahead with plans for the hospital in
Without them.
general, without consulting Medford.
I mean,
So I can add something to that. It's actually a good transition of what I wanted to add. So I spoke with the chairman of the Medford Ad Hoc Committee,
Good.
John Falco. He stated that they didn't have any kind of reservations or doubts about Malden's commitment or its desire to work with Medford, so we can dispel any of that. And he also stated that he has a connection to Sue Sandberg, the new CEO of Melrose Wakefield Health, and he'd like to set up a meeting which would include the two chairmen of the two ad hoc committees to see where they're at and if there's an opportunity to work together in 2019.
Great.
Following that, we tentatively established springtime next year to rejoin our committees in two joint meetings. Again, a meeting in Medford and again, a meeting in Malden. That's just very tentative at this time, but it was something that we were both interested in, and we said that we would bring it back to the respective committees, and I've done that.
Great.
Okay.
Great. So they were very, I think sending the mission statement back to them will be a good sign, you know, because it looks like things are moving forward and everybody's sort of on board and alongside. The other thing that we went over with them were not only the CPC funding opportunities with both Malden and Medford, but the state matching grants. And so I have for you, if this helps get everyone oriented, these are maps of the subject properties that are for sale. Just pass it down. And of course, the one on your left will be 47 Grover Road. That is the subject parcel in Medford. They expressed some interest in pursuing like a land grant, which is for more of a conservation. I think Stephen can speak to.
You say
what
they,
the-
you mean the Medford Ad Hoc Committee?
Yes, he can speak to more or less what those grants will apply toward. But really, you have certain stretches of those parcels, actually a substantial stretch of those parcels on either side, like 57 Hospital Road on the Malden side, right here, and on 47 Grover Road on the Medford side, that they're either riparian, they're rocky, the environmental impacts would be huge, you'd be blasting away on both sides to get very much developable space on those parcels. And so those matching state grants are good for those kinds of properties because you can bring in sort of conservation areas, which would be part of your open space, your overall allotment for open space in those areas that you really can't you can't build on. You know, we're really looking at 100 Hospital Road because of all of the grading and the parking. That's really the subject parcel that we think is more substantively, you know, can actually accommodate the housing element. It's not to say that some of those side parcels, you might have some space, but for the most part, we need to look at possibly pursuing these matching state grants on either side. The mayors would have to be on board with that because the cities have to act as applicants for the state grants. And then the ultimate goal, of course, is obtaining and acquiring 100 Hospital Road.
All right, let's hear
All
from
of
council
the
and come out.
Yeah.
Are those state grants, how are those structured? Are those matching grants or those
Yeah, they are.
About 2 to 1.
two?
They're about,
So the state-
Malden's match, I think, is 68%, and it's a reimbursement grant for the land
So
grants.
our share would be 2/3.
Our share would be 1/3.
Okay, I like that better.
Yeah, so they reimburse 68% of the cost, I think
What we're gonna-
Medford is 62.
What we'd like to bring back
Oh,
to
I'm
you.
sorry, can I just,
Sure,
sorry,
sure.
can I just finish? Because I just want to be sure that when we're putting our funding in, obviously we want open space, but we want to make sure we also have space that's usable for the community. And we want to make sure everybody's on board with that, so it'd be great to reforest the entire area, but we do want to make sure if we're putting resources in, it's resources that the public is going to have access to. That's my,
Right.
Right.
Absolutely agree.
Benefit as many people as possible.
absolutely.
Right, right. It
I want
has
to
to
leave it
be-
as vague as that because I think we're all flexible on it, but we want to make sure that
I
that's.
think it has to be a smart and thoughtful use of the existing property up there. And I think that you can get both. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to eke out the open space that we're looking for, but also the other uses, the community facilities and amenities, the housing element. What I want to say though about these matching state grants is, you know, the CPC applications very clearly say that they cannot be the only source of funding for an acquisition. So, you know, we may not be ready to necessarily file as soon as you would want to put in, say, a preliminary application to Malden or Medford CPCs.
May 1st, 2019, I believe, is the preliminary
But-
application deadline.
Yeah, what I would like to do is bring back for you sort of an analysis of the matching state grants in conjunction with the CPC.
What's a good time for you to come back, Leo?
When would you like to meet again?
Well, when you have more data to share with us, what would be, I assume that you'll hear some more from BAC?
Yeah, I
And you'll have
would
some
say
information on grants?
probably by the end of January,
Okay.
early February.
That might be a mutually convenient time for the chairman to meet with the new CEO as well.
Okay.
And I know that Bob and I have begun drafting, in a very preliminary state, the framework of a CPC application, even though we're not quite there. We still have 6 months to work on that. We don't have a letter of intent with Hallmark yet. But by the end of January, early February, I think would be a good time for us to meet again.
Yeah, I think you need to have an overview of, you know, what we're looking at as far as the available funding sources.
Any other questions, comments, motions? from-
Just a quick 2
Yes,
comments. Is
Steve.
that, in this whole process, we can start early though, separate is also the $1.5 million appropriation from the state that we could also be working simultaneously for 57 Hospital Road perhaps, because 2.2 acres of that is deed restricted to the state, and it might be a good entry point in the conversation with Hallmark to, you know, work on that improvements to Fellsmere Park money for dealing with the 57 Hospital Road.
What is the 1.5 million reference?
In the, I think it's in the environmental bond bill, they have,
Fellsmere Pond?
yeah, they have, in that.
I don't believe that was ever funded, and I don't think there's high hopes for it to be funded.
Well, they have to go through the application process with the state and the governor to release the funding, but in the law, they did do an appropriation for improvements to Fellsmere Park. So it's a possibility if we make a good argument. So it's worthwhile to try.
So we can come back with some more information on that as well.
Yeah, and I think there was, a source that looked like it might come up, $500,000 toward a community
Yeah,
center.
there's another one, there's another state law had a $500,000 for a community center for Malden, but it's not clear whether the city council would like to have another community center or updates to a community center. But the conversation has been that we need an arts space, community space, and the Malden Hospital formerly was a very large community resource. So there's some thoughts of maybe trying to have the boiler building.
Repurpose an existing structure.
Yeah.
So with that $500,000, I don't know how much it would cost to refurbish the whole building, and some of that be used towards land acquisition, where the remaining balance be used towards refurbishing the existing.
The idea would be, using that 500 for a center versus maybe not having a place, where we could have a place because they have the nursing dormitory.
But that would be on, so it sounds like it's be on top, not really contribute much towards the land acquisition.
Correct.
Right,
It's complementary. I'm saying when you're looking at a whole package.
That's great.
For a whole package for 57 Hospital Road, the question is, do we even want that there? But it's worth discussing because there is that money and a decision needs to be made on a community center location and doing a simultaneous proposal to the state to get that money.
Okay.
So the Medford ad hoc expressed interest indicating their support for securing appropriate and applicable grant funding and coordinating with Malden in applying for grants. For example, Medford applying for a land grant for 47 Grover Road in Medford, and Malden applying for a land grant for 57 Hospital Road in Malden. That is just an example, but those are the things that were discussed and kind of put out there with the Medford ad hoc committee, and they were very receptive to that. The case, of course, we've already discussed for the matching state land and park grants, why we need to consider those. In addition to talking about the CPC applications going forward, is because of the funding source needs to be other than CPA funds alone. The intercity efforts are absolutely more compelling to state agencies. They like to see communities working together. It makes a much stronger case to get those monies. And the Medford ad hoc, they want to collaborate, coordinate their efforts with the Malden ad hoc on the funding strategy. The other upshot to that is it involves both mayors and requires that each city act as applicants. So, you know, that's going to maybe be a little bit more of an uphill push, but I feel like things, maybe it was a bit of an icebreaker at the World Cafe event. The mayor was being rather attentive. He didn't say much, but he was definitely paying attention. So we remain ever hopeful.
As we all do.
Yes.
All right, well, the time is 7:10. We do have a full council meeting tonight. It's our last meeting of the year. If you have any other final words or
The
thoughts?
last thing I just want to say is that there's a lot going on. They're updating their open space and rec plan with MHSDCmeeting. I went to that meeting. Malden Hospital was brought up. The other thing is their CPC is actually doing a survey.
Okay.
So our survey may get pushed back maybe to the beginning of the year because it's supposed to be sort of a survey for Malden and Medford specific to the hospital. The other thing that we would really like to get your attention about is really getting some support to them around the Lawrence Memorial ER closure, because that's really taking up all the oxygen in the room.
Right.
And it affects Malden as well as it does Medford. So it's a time to really collaborate with them. It helps us as well on that other
Right.
issue.
And I know they do have a meeting there at the hospital for public comment on January 2nd.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to be coming in rather prepared together.
So you'll find a table here. This is overall for
Yeah.
Melrose Wakefield Health. But you'll see that the numbers for Malden are not too far behind Medford as far as our use of their facility.
Right, so it affects both communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, point taken.
Yeah.
Okay, Council Spatafora, minutes were circulated, you want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Make the motion to approve the minutes.
All those in favor
I'd
of
like to make
approving?
one comment. If we just, Leah's first name is Leah. If we just update that and, yay.
Yep.
Emerson.
All in
Last name
favor of
is
the
Emerson.
approving of the minutes of the last meeting? Say yes.
With the correction, right, of the spelling?
Oh, it was a correction of the minutes?
Yes.
Well, her name is spelled wrong.
Okay,
So Prisco made a motion to change, to let the minutes reflect the correct spelling.
all right, well,
As amended, is correct. Seconded.
motion to approve as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Do I hear a motion to adjourn, coming back at the end of January, ideally? Motion by member Tamaro,